Is the shayla of the day. Very interesting question. So somebody is buying an apartment in Israel, and they have the following question. The apartment they're building, they're looking at is two large towers, and between the two large towers that are at around 6th to 10th floor, there's kind of a flat area between the two towers, and so apartments which open up on that area have like a outside area, and so the selling point is the sukkah. So their question is that a valid area for a sukkah if most of the time it's going to be in the shadow of one or two of those towers, because it's literally between two large towers, got another 20 floors on either side. Very interesting question. Now you may be wondering why it is the Sukkah's question at Pesach, but this happens all the time. I get Pesach questions right after Sukkahs, right? Because we start building towards the next one. So, but this is the shayla. Obviously, it has an effect because the value of the apartment and so on. So here's an interesting answer. So the Gemara actually starts off on the first daf in Masechah Sukkah, daf Beis Aleph, and it's commenting on the Mishnah. The Mishnah says Sukkah she gavai me'as from amot pasul. If you have a sukkah which is above 20 amos high, it is invalid. The Gemara tries to investigate why is that. What is the deficiency in such a sukkah? So Gemara brings three opinions. The first opinion is that the Torah pasul says lema'an yeidu diras. You should know that I made the nation of Israel sit in sukkahs. But if it's so high up, you're not gonna really notice, right? You're not even aware of the schach. So therefore, it's an invalidation. Number two is Rabba Zeira. Rabba Zeira says is because at that height you're not really sitting in the shade of the schach, you're sitting in the shade of the walls most of the time, right? And then finally there's the last opinion, and that is the opinion of Rabba, which says that it is that you need a diras arai, not diras keva. At the moment you need to have a temporary structure. By the time you're going up to 20 amos, you need something much more significant. If that's significant, then it's not going to be a good sukkah. Those are the three opinions in the Gemara, and the Gemara goes backwards and forwards the number of questions on them. Interestingly enough, in that second opinion, the opinion in Rabba Zeira, it sounds like there's a problem if you're sitting in the shade of something else, a wall, as opposed to the schach. The question is which of these three opinions is actually which is interesting because these opinions are not opinions in halacha, they're in the logic of the halacha, but they have a different ramification on the halacha as described here. Meaning if you pass it like the second opinion, there's a concern that you have to be sitting in the shade of the schach, then there might be a problem when you're between two skyscrapers. Whereas if you pass that you need to have shaltah amos, if the sukkah is a low roof but you're in the shade of a skyscraper, no problem. So is there a way to know which way to pass? The answer is yes. In Orach Chaim Gimel, which is where the Shulchan Aruch paskins about high sukkahs, he says that a sukkah which is 20 amos high is pasul, whether it's a big or small sukkah. The Mishnah Berurah says from here you see he does not paskin like the second opinion, because if you have a very large sukkah, even if it's very tall, you're most likely sitting in the schach shade, right? Meaning you widen it out, you're sitting in the schach. So clearly we're not paskin like the second opinion. And then it says, and even if the walls don't reach the schach, it goes up to at least 10 tefachim, but it doesn't reach the schach, it's also fine, which is against the first opinion, because the first opinion says delay shaltah, but if it goes all the way up, it's fine. So we pass like the third opinion in the logic of a high sukkah, which means then it would be all right. There would be no problem with sitting. If when you look up you see schach and schai, then it's fine, even if there might be another shade which is in the way. And then I was discussing this at home with my son, and my son said, because when he was in 6th grade, he did Masechah Sukkah, and they did, between the class, 12,000 blat in their chazaras, so he knows this all off by heart. So he said, yeah, you're right, but even in Rabba Zeira's opinion, which is in the first daf, the Gemara actually questions Rabba Zeira's opinion. Rabba Zeira is the one who says you can't be sitting in the shade of the walls, you have to be sitting in the shade of the roof. And I was saying that's analogous to a sukkah between two skyscrapers. But it's not exactly analogous, because the Gemara asks the same question. It says, according to Rabba Zeira, that in the second opinion, that is a problem. The reason of a high sukkah is because you're going to be sitting in the shade of the walls and not the shade of the schach. The Gemara says, what happens if you make your sukkah by ashros kanim, which means in a valley? Same problem, which is precisely our case, right? Meaning you have valley walls going up on either side, so you're sitting in the shade. And we don't say that's a problem. That's the Gemara's assumption is. So the Gemara says, you're right. The difference is dal ashros kanim, then you're sitting in the shade of schach. Meaning, take away the valley walls and still a kosher sukkah. But in the case where you have a really tall sukkah, take away the walls, that you're not sitting in the shade of anything then. Meaning, the roof is too far high up. Which means even in the second opinion, which you don't paskin like, it would still be all right to have very tall skyscrapers, which is how, if anybody had a family who grew up in Manhattan and in the Lower East Side, or wherever else it is, or on the Upper East Side or the Upper West Side, where you had sukkahs between buildings, people sat in sukkahs between buildings, even though there was no chance there was any sunlight you ever saw, and there's no midday because it's in the fall, so there's no sun right above you at any point, so you're never sitting in the shade of the schach. But being as actually it's under the clear skies, it's still all right. Just an interesting question, interesting permutations, and it goes into knowing not just the halacha, but the logic of the halacha, which actually gives you this permutation.